All right, so let's take a look at some parallel circuits and learning how to identify parallel resistors and components. So in order to analyze, these types of circuitries, you need to know how to identify them first. And so one of the ways that what I used to do whenever I was learning this topic in school is I would take a highlighter and I would highlight each node. And so you may be asking yourself, what is a node? Well, a node is it's just a junction point. It's a junction point where components are connected together at that one point. All right, so this is the method that I used to do. I'll take a highlighter and I will highlight. I'll start from the source and I will start highlighting the node. And so the question in your mind should be, how do I know where to highlight? Well, all I'm doing is I'm just highlighting all the way up until I get to a resistor. So as you can see, I started here and I kept going over here. Got to this point right here. I can go down because I still don't see a resistor. Then I came back and I finished it up on R2. All right, so now this right here, this is node 1. That's one node. And so I would do the same thing for the other nodes, but except I would change my resistor color. This time I'll use a blue and I'll start doing this one. So on this side of the resistor, I'm just gonna keep highlighting up until I see a resistor or a component, resistor or a component. All right, so here, this is node 2. All right, so in order for the resistors or components to be in parallel, they have to be connected by the same two nodes. So if you look at R1, if you compare R1 to R2, well, R1 is connected to node 1, and R2 is connected to node 2. Now, this one is considered to be in parallel because look, R2 is connected to the same nodes, node 1 and node 2, and also the voltage source. The voltage source is in parallel with R1 and R2 because it meets the criteria of being in parallel, connected to the same nodes, the same two nodes. All right, so let's move on to the next example. All right, so you're not going to always get a circuit that looks like this one. Sometimes it may look kind of crazy like this one. It doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing as the one on the left, but these are the one on the right is the same circuit, believe it or not. And I can prove that by doing the same method. Start off with my yellow. So like I said before, I'm just highlighting everything up until I see a resistor. All right, let's switch to my blue. Same thing over here. All the way up till I see a resistor. All right. Now for this one, just doing the same thing. Highlighting all the way up till I see a resistor. Boom. Highlighting all the way up till I see a resistor. So they're the same circuit, same principles applies. R1 is in parallel with R2. V1 is in parallel with R1 and R2. So they're the same circuit. All right, so let's move on to the next one. And so this one on the right looks a little crazy, but this one is the same circuit. So let's practice on this one. So we're highlighting all the way up till we see a resistor. Yep. We can go this way. We still don't see a resistor. All the way until we get right there. And switch to blue. Come over here. Highlight all this. So again, this is your node 1. This is your node 2. All right, so if you don't have highlighters, I mean, what you could do, and I did this too whenever I didn't have a highlighter, is you just draw a circle around the node. All right, so that'll be your node 1. And you just do the same thing on this other side. You do something like that. So, all right, so let's look at this a little step further on how do you write it. So, in the books, in your textbooks, and also in industry, you'll see people writing something like this, R1. They won't write out R1 is in parallel with R2. They'll symbolize it. This right here is a symbol for in parallel. So R1 is in parallel with R2. All right. Then if you wanted to, I guess you can say, which is also in parallel with V1 or the source voltage. All right. Let's move on to the next one. This one has 3 resistors. And so we're gonna do the same thing. Let's identify nodes first. Okay, we'll keep on going. We'll keep on going. We still haven't seen a resistor yet. So, all right, let's move on to the next color. Node 2. Let's keep on going till you see a resistor. Boom. Keep on going till you see a resistor. Boom. And I keep saying resistor, but really it's whenever you see a component. So this is your node 1. And this is your node. I'm sorry. That's your node 1. This is your node 2. But I mean, you can name them whatever you want to. It's just as long as you are naming them differently. All right. So how do we write this one out? We'll say something like this. We'll say that R1 is in parallel with R2, which is in parallel with R3. All right. Move on to the next one. All right. So this one looks a little unorthodox, but let's do the same thing. Start off at a voltage source. All right. Came to this point right here. We're going to keep highlighting. Oh, came to another junction point right here. Little point. Go down. We're going to keep on with the same color. Keep on with the same color. All right, so now let's finish it off. Up here at the top. All right, I think that's it. So let's change the color. And we'll start right here. All right. Boom. So this yellow one over here, that's your node one. This blue one is your node two. And so you can easily see that R1, R2, and R3 are in parallel. But what about R4? Well, let's go back to our definition of parallel resistors. And let's see, R4 is connected to node 1 and node 2. So therefore, R4 is in parallel with R1, 2, 3, and also the voltage source. So if we want to write this out, we say R1 parallel with R2, which is parallel with R3, parallel with R4. All right, so hopefully by now you're seeing this. All right, so let's move on to the next one. That's the same one. All right, let's move on to this last one right here. All right, so we're gonna try to figure out which one's in parallel. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing. Start at a voltage source. We'll keep going until we see a resistor. Oh, boom, we saw a resistor. So that's it for that node right there. So that's node one. All right, so let's switch our colors. All right, let's keep on where we left off on the other side of the resistor. All right, come down here. Come over here. All right, so that's node two. All right, so we got one more node left. I'll switch the color to a pink. All right, let's keep going until you get to a resistor or a component. All right, so this is node three. So this one actually has three nodes on it. All right, but if I ask you, which resistors are in parallel, you just apply the same definition, same principle, that the component has to be connected by the same two nodes. And so let's do that here. So if we look at R1 and R2, if we look at R1 and R4, let's evaluate those two. Well, R4 is connected to node 1 and node 2. But however, R1 is connected to node 2 and node 3. So these two, they are not in parallel. All right, so what about R1 and R2? Well, R1 is, like we said before, R1 is connected to R2 and R node 1 and node 3. And R2 is connected to the same two nodes, node 2 and node 3. Also, R3 is connected to node 2 and node 3. So R1 is in parallel with R2, which is parallel to R3. And this, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because this is actually a series parallel network, which we'll get into a little bit later. But you want to write out the parallel component, you'll say R1 is in parallel to R2, which is in parallel to R3. And so this is a great example of how you use the definition, the principle of identifying parallel components or resistors. So what I want you to do is until you get good enough to, I want you to go ahead and circle or either highlight your nodes. That's going to help you out in the long run until you get to the point where you can visually see that, hey, these resistors are in parallel. You can see the nodes, but until you get to that point, it'll be to your best advantage if you go the extra step in highlighting or either circling your nodes. All right, so that's all I have for this video. Thank you.